Welcome once again to the Hit the Deck podcast, where we talk deck hockey, street hockey, ball hockey. It's hockey in sneakers. Thank you once again for tuning in to the third episode of the Hit the Deck podcast. Let's get to the starting lineup. In goal, I am number 35, the American Rhino, Gary McComiskey, and of course, my illustrious co-host.
On defense, number 4, I'm James Sajazi.
Hello, James Sajazi. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. How about yourself, Mr. Rhino Mac?
Yeah, I'm still a little under the weather, but overall I can't complain. Happy to be doing another podcast. And thank you to all the listeners who have stuck with us for the first few.
Yeah, does this count as a hat trick in terms of
Yeah, I think
hockey?
so. We've successfully released a podcast 3 weeks in a row. That's a podcast hat trick.
Nice. All right. We've made it this far. I'm glad. Hopefully there's a few more ahead of us as well.
Yeah, here's hoping. All right, so why don't we go ahead and you tell us what's on deck, if you do not mind.
Not at all, and here's what's on deck. Thank you, Gary. Leading off, we have the Miracle on Ice 36th anniversary. February 22nd and 24th marks the 36th anniversary of the U.S. hockey team's incredible victories. Then we'll go on the road again, prepping for unfamiliar deck hockey playing areas such as on the street and or asphalt, or in a school gym, or on tile, or in a roller hockey rink with boards, etc., etc. And then we'll take a peek into the gear bag, where we will talk about the hockey wraparound. And that is what's on deck.
Thank you, James.
My pleasure. Thank you.
No, thank you. No, thank you. You know what? Thank you very much.
Few too many passes there, so hopefully we take the shot.
Yeah, like the Rangers power play.
Yeah.
All right. So, why don't we get started with our first segment, the anniversary of this call.
Do you believe in miracles? Yes!
Unbelievable indeed. It was, it's been a long time since I was in school. What did you say the math was? 36 years?
Yeah, 36.
36 years since a team of scrappy American college students beat a team of all but professional Soviet players, the best team in the world.
Amen to that, yeah. February 22nd was the game where they beat the Russians 4-3. And then on the 24th is when Team USA beat Finland to win the gold. So, yeah, just absolutely incredible. To this day, it still ranks up there as one of probably the greatest sports moment ever. At least in America, I think in the world. So, if I may be so bold. But
you may. I'll allow it.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you.
And, a lot of people forget that the Soviet team was not the gold medal game. Like you said, they had to beat Finland as well.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the reasons why I just wanted to mention the 22nd and 24th, which the 22nd happened to be my grandmother's birthday, and the 24th happens to be my mom's birthday, so a couple of other things true to my heart as well. So, but yeah, exactly. A lot of people just assume that, being Mets fans here in New York, we go through the same thing with the 86 World Series as well, where people thought that the Buckner play, which didn't even have an effect on the win or loss of that particular game, people just assumed that was the World Series winner right there.
Right. No, that was Game 6.
That's right. That was only Game 6, and which was a win or go home game for the Mets anyway.
Absolutely.
But yeah, for Team USA, that's right. They beat the Russians, which was just absolutely off the charts for American patriotism, especially at that particular time in the country's history. But right, if they didn't beat Finland a couple of days later, they might not have even won any medal, as it turned out, with the way the seedings were. So it really, not taking away from the significance of beating the Russians besides the hockey point of view, but exactly, not finishing it off and winning the gold really would have left a sour taste in the mouths of that team.
Yeah, apparently Herb Brooks, who was the coach of that team, I don't believe this was included in the Miracle movie that Disney made about the historic event, but before that Finland game, Herb Brooks told the team, if you lose this game, you will regret it to your grave.
I appreciate how you clean that up very, very well. Yeah, God bless him. Herb Brooks, Coach Brooks, just equals genius. God rest his soul. Unfortunately, Coach Brooks passed away in a car accident in August of 2003. Yeah. Yeah, he was only 66, but will live forever in the hearts of all sports fans. But yeah, leading up to what we were going to talk about as well in this topic was HBO did an excellent documentary around the 20th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice titled Do You Believe in Miracles? The story of the 1980 U.S. hockey team.
Yeah, sorry for the interruption. It was in 2001, so that was just over 20 years, yeah.
Gotcha. And right, in that documentary, I mean, personally, for me, I wasn't even 2 years old at the time when the miracle occurred, but that documentary is excellent. I definitely recommend anyone out there to see it if you haven't before. But right, like Gary mentioned, that particular speech was relayed. The story was relayed by the captain, Mike Eruzione, and just there were so many funny bits like that and inside stories that I don't know if anybody had known before that documentary, but for Coach Brooks to be that cool and that honest under that amount of pressure is just beyond me.
Yeah, and just give you a little perspective, I was not yet born when that game took place. I would not be born until later that year.
That's right. So a couple of great things happened in 1980. So
yeah,
about that.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. That documentary, again, Do You Believe in Miracles? The story of the 1980 U.S. hockey team. It is a documentary that's narrated by Liev Schreiber, so it's got that professional HBO documentary gravitas to it, but it's also got a bunch of clips from the actual games, like file footage from the games leading up to those Olympics and from the Olympics themselves, which, as great as the Disney movie was, which I guess we'll also talk about in a minute, as great as that movie was, it didn't have the air of authenticity that this documentary has. I watched it today, and I'd never seen it before, per James' recommendation, and I highly recommend it to you, the listener, as well. But it resonates, it rings true, because it is the actual events. And that documentary is available on HBO Go currently to anybody who wants to watch it. It's under the sports section, right there near the front if you want to watch it. And if you're a hockey fan, especially an American hockey fan, I highly recommend you seek it out if possible, because it makes you feel good as a hockey fan and it makes you feel good as an American. I gotta say, with Miracle and with this movie, the last minute of that Soviet game has me on the edge of my seat. I know how it turns out, but I'm still on the edge of my seat holding my breath to see what happens, because just the dramatic tension that game represented comes through so well.
Amen to that. And like Gary was saying too, the actual story and the stories surrounding the whole Olympics in Lake Placid, upstate New York, just the state of the U.S. wasn't at its best, to say the least. And then the Olympics themselves, people had trouble getting to Lake Placid, buses breaking down, ticket problems. Even the broadcast itself, I think it was tape delayed or something before people were able to see it here in the U.S. because...
Right, that's true. The game was scheduled for 5 o'clock. But it was scheduled long before anybody knew that the Americans would be playing the Soviets in the medal round game. So the network wanted to move it up to prime time so everybody could see it, but the Soviet team refused. They said, it's scheduled for 5, we're playing at 5. So the network compromised, and they played the game at 5, but they tape delayed it and only broadcast it at 8.
Yeah, so just which makes the documentary really worth your while to check out, because that's what happened. That's the true story. You really couldn't script it. Absolutely unbelievable. Everything that went on around it and the unlikely outcome. Yeah, people didn't even pick the U.S. to be in the top 5 at the end of the Olympics, let alone go toe-to-toe with the greatest team in the world at the time and beat them, and then go on to win the gold. But yeah, the other great thing about the documentary, too, is that you really get an appreciation of what a genius Coach Herb Brooks was. And he's legendary in the state of Minnesota. He's a coach there. And even if you're a hockey fan outside the Wild Arena, I believe that's where his statue is, a la like a Rocky Balboa, except he was the real thing and genius. So really, absolutely, you can't say enough about it. But leading up to the 2004 Disney movie, which, like Gary said, is entitled Miracle, where Kurt Russell portrayed Coach Brooks and did a very, very good job at doing that. the actual story was so much better and more incredible than any made up Hollywood script that the movie wasn't too far off from the truth, which gives the documentary a little bit, like you said, using the actual footage and telling the story the way it happened, really just unbelievable.
And
so
James,
unbelievable. I mean, yeah.
Something you may not know, and I didn't know until I saw it doing some research around this topic.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, there was a movie that was made about this incident that was released in 1981, 1 year after the Miracle on Ice. And Jim Craig, the goalie for Team USA, was played by Steve Guttenberg.
Oh, I see. I did not know. That is a tidbit and a half. It
Yeah.
was made for TV, if I understand the story correctly, but I did not know that. Steve Guttenberg.
Steve Guttenberg.
1 year later. Now you know Jim Craig, really. Okay, yeah, you won the gold medal, you beat the Russians, but now that must have really made him legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
So, nicely done. That's a great tidbit there, Gary.
You got it.
And then just the final part on, I mean, we could talk about this all day. We're gushing over it, and I think any American or any hockey fan out there would agree. But what it did to help the sport of hockey, especially in the U.S., tremendously helping deck hockey, roller hockey, ice hockey in America. Lord knows how many young Americans decided to become hockey players just from that experience. And in Olympics since then, and even now that they're bringing back the World Cup of Hockey this September, the U.S. is in pretty good hands. I mean, we've had a pretty darn good roster of American-born hockey players out there that have thrived in the NHL and in the Olympics too.
Yeah. I mean, just watching the documentary today made me want to play hockey. Not that it takes a lot to make me want to play hockey, but just sitting there watching it, I wanted to strap on the pads right then and there because it was just so exciting, you know. So, and I wanted to feel that euphoria of competition, which anybody who plays any sport really, but particularly hockey, understands.
And yeah, just to contradict myself from closing out the story, to reiterate your point before, how you knew the outcome of the game, but still you were on the edge of your seat watching the game versus Russia. The other thing about that, to mount the tension that was already there, was the U.S. took the lead, a 1-goal lead, with 10 minutes left in the third period, which, when you hear Micah Ruzioni telling the story, it just felt like forever. He kept looking up at the clock, and he was hoping that when he'd look up again, 5 minutes have passed, but it was only a couple of seconds. So just really absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
absolutely incredible.
In the Miracle movie, you hear Kurt Russell saying, "Oh, too much time," and keep telling the players to play your game. That's not Hollywood embellishment. That's actually what Herb Brooks was saying to his players on the bench. And it's amazing to think now that a sporting event, an Olympic game, particularly a sport that isn't that popular in this country, it's amazing to think what kind of impact that can have on people, on Americans all over the country. It's just, today that kind of thing doesn't seem possible because I guess we've become such a global society and we have so many different outlets for everything. But back in 1980, 36 years ago, this one event united the whole country, and it was just an incredible experience. I wish I had lived through it. As I said, I wasn't born yet, but it must have been, for anybody who did live through it, it must have been a once-in-a-lifetime thing to witness that.
Amen. And like you said, too, the HBO documentary did an excellent job of portraying that because, like you said, it was true. That's what happened. They didn't have to embellish on anything, and they just tell the story the way it was, as unbelievable as it was. And excellent point, too, about the sport itself, where a lot of people to this day, at least in our circles, consider hockey, oh, it's Canadian, it's foreign, it's on ice, I don't want to skate, blah, blah, blah. Which, it's a great sport. It's a terrific sport. But, yeah, okay, fine. It's not America's pastime baseball, or the NFL is just eating everybody's lunch nowadays anyway. But really, that example is the pinnacle of what hockey can do. And it's true, just kind of like the black sheep of the family, that in terms of sports, to resonate and lift a country up, and my humble opinion, the greatest country in the world, in the U.S., was just that much more incredible.
All right, so I think we've talked enough about the Miracle on Ice. I think everybody agrees it was an incredible thing. It won't be duplicated, and it's awesome. Moving on. With that brilliant transition, I should be in radio. So James and I recently took a bit of a road trip, a small road trip, to visit our favorite baseball team, the New York Mets, as they left for spring training. But it got us thinking about road trips in deck hockey and going out to different places that you may not have played before, unfamiliar places, and how do we prepare for some place that we haven't played before? What's the process? What's the difference? How is one spot different from another? One surface different from another? So that's a little conversation we want to have right now.
Yeah, and particularly from the goalie's point of view, like we're saying, we're used to playing in a park, so it's kind of an enclosed area. One of the tournaments that we participated in was on a side street in Brooklyn, and just for a goalie's point of view, the depth perception must really be a little odd for you. I'm just curious if you'd elaborate on that. For example, if you're on a street and it's crossing an intersection and you're on one side of the ice per se, in your goal, looking out and not seeing a barrier behind the other goal must really make it seem like it goes on forever and ever. Is that something that kind of plays with your mind a little bit, needs adjusting in terms of picking up the puck or things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, anybody who's tried to sell a house knows that if you have people coming in for an open house, then you don't want your house to look cluttered. You want it to look as sparse as possible because that makes it look bigger, less closed in, less cluttered there is around you. Your brain looks at that and thinks, oh, this is there's more space here than there actually is. And I guess part of that has to do with peripheral vision. Part of that has to do with linear relationships. I don't know. I'm not a brain scientist. Ask Ben Carson. But what I do know is that when you're outside, that effect gets magnified even more. So if you're at the end of a street, it's different than if you're playing on a court because the sides aren't as closed in, right? So it's not like you're playing with boards on either side. You have your playing surface, but then it kind of goes off a bit on either side as well. Plus, as you said, the end of the street it goes on forever. So it's unfamiliar. It's unfamiliar in terms of what you're looking at, and it's unfamiliar in terms of what, as you said, what you perceive as depth perception. So yeah, those definitely take more getting used to as a goalie, because I'm used to standing, and not just that one particular area. Anytime you go to a new place, if it's not kind of your standard court configuration that you're used to, or rink configuration that you're used to, it's going to look different because as a goalie, you're standing with your back to the net. So you rely on certain visual cues on the other side of the court or the rink. Most specifically the other net, but other things as well. You rely on those visual cues to kind of orient yourself in relation to your own net, because you can't usually turn your head around and see where the posts are. You can also kind of bang your stick against the post to get an idea of where you are. Goalies often will do that, but it's a lot easier to kind of orient yourself based on what you can see, because if you're trying to position yourself to make a save, or if you make a save and you find yourself out of position and you're trying to regroup, it's not always going to be a situation where you have time to bang your stick against the post, or you don't want to go feeling for the post, because that's going to take you out of the moment. So yeah, it's sometimes it can take a while of actually playing to orient yourself to your actual surroundings based on where you are. And it's definitely something that you need to adjust to as a goalie.
Yeah, not making excuses here either, which excellent points, by the way. Like you said, you can't scout players, you can't scout the playing area. It's not the NHL, obviously, so the arenas aren't the same and the playing surfaces aren't more or less exact.
Although, James, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Sure.
Did you know that according to the NHL rulebook, rinks don't have to be a certain length by a certain width? They just have to be symmetrical for each team. So you could have all kinds of a team could theoretically have all kinds of funky configurations. Each arena could have its own ice configuration as long as each side is symmetrical for each team. Nowadays, the ice surface is standardized, but a lot of older buildings, before the new arenas and the new stadiums were built, oftentimes with the older buildings, you would find one ice surface that was a lot bigger or a lot smaller than others. So that's something that you may not be aware of.
I wasn't aware of the rules per se, but just as being a fan and learning of the hallowed grounds of the Boston Garden, where the likes of Bobby Orr played, yeah, I always heard that was a little shorter than other ice surfaces around the NHL at the time. So that's pretty interesting. So, yeah, I mean, it's not like baseball where you have a little quirk here or there. Obviously, the diamond is the same in every Major League Baseball stadium, but foul territory could be much different.
Sure.
The outfield could be completely different, like Fenway Park, to go back to Boston as well. Mm-hmm. So for our purposes in deck hockey, yeah, I mean, it's not that drastic in the NHL, obviously.
I'll do you one better. It doesn't even have to be wide open. You could, in theory, plop the penalty boxes right down at center ice as long as there is equal room on both sides.
Really?
Yeah, like I said, it just has to be symmetrical.
Okay, what? Okay, you may be onto something there.
Yeah,
get more ratings or whatever the case is. But I would prefer that being a defenseman than seeing a stupid guy trying to go around the penalty box. At least I know where he's going before he's going. That would be nice. But anyway, yeah. So getting back to the deck hockey leagues and tournaments, also with the depth perception, does that affect how you view and react to a shot? For example, in some leagues, slap shots are allowed, in others they are not. If a player is taking a snapshot off of you and you're looking at the puck, obviously, or the player himself, but then with your peripheral vision, you're also seeing the street that doesn't end in the back, does that kind of mess with your timing a little bit?
Yeah, I guess it can. But again, that kind of goes back to the idea of orienting yourself and having to know where you are in relation to your net, especially if you don't have a crease drawn. That can also be a difficulty in terms of orienting yourself. But you get yes, I would say early in the game, if you're not familiar with the place you're playing on, your depth perception can definitely take some adjustment to get it right. But once you get a feel for the surface, you kind of get an idea of where the puck is in relation to everything else. It's just that it's a learning curve. So,
gotcha. And go ahead.
I was just going to. So if you are a goalie and you have the opportunity to get some practice time on that unfamiliar surface, absolutely do it. If you have the opportunity.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you for that as a friendly reminder to our goalies who they are the most important players on the hockey team, is when you do go to a new place to play that you're unfamiliar with, definitely try and take shots in different areas and don't kill your goalie. Don't shoot at his head, but shoot at his blocker or his glove, obviously his pads, so he could get the leg saves going as well. But take smart shots on your goalie when you're warming up and when you're trying to warm him up, just for that reason. Because if you're used to playing in a certain area, if you're in a gym, let's say, and then you're playing outside on a street, or if you're playing in an enclosed roller hockey rink, you need to adapt to that. And your goalie is your most important player out there. So if you want to win, you need him to be, or her, to be at the top of his or her game. So do what you can when you're warming him up or her up to give that person the best chance to get adapted as quickly as possible. And then hopefully when the game starts, your goalie will be all set and prepared as possible.
Thank you, James. As a goalie, I appreciate that.
Well, as a defenseman, we love you guys. So our job is to make sure that you don't have to face any shots. So anytime a shot is taken, it's the failure on the defensive part. So we love you guys and gals out there. So God bless you all.
Yeah, all right.
And then just the final point, at least for me, on the road again topic, is that obviously the puck/ball reacts differently on a curved street or on a flat gym floor or a bumpy handball court. So that affects the speed of the game, whereas if you can make longer passes because of a truer surface on a gym floor, as opposed to keeping the game a little tighter, because if you're on a bumpy surface you can't pass as long or take shots as far off because you can't control the puck. Do you feel that as a goalie going to a new area, an unfamiliar area, that the pace is a lot faster and you feel yourself, even if you're facing shots or when your team is in the zone, that the other team is bringing a lot more pressure on you a lot more frequently than usual?
Yes and no. I would say yes, obviously, if you're on a smooth surface, then the puck is going to move quicker and potentially you will be facing more shots, or at least the shots will be getting to you quicker. But that being said, the pace of play is always dictated by the players. So if you have players that are slowing the game down intentionally because it's a strategy or for whatever reason, then obviously that's going to take precedence over the surface that you're playing on. What I will say is a much bigger factor than the surface that you're playing on in terms of speeding up the game is the size of the area, the court, the rink that you're playing on. If you have walls tight into you, or relatively tight, if it's a small rink or a small court that you're playing on, then that game is going to move a lot faster because the ball is going to come off the walls a lot quicker, and potentially, depending on how many players you have playing, whether it's 3, 4, or 5 skaters at a time. And just for you, the listener, a reminder, skaters is here defined on this podcast as any non-goalie player in a deck hockey game. For an explanation on why we call those players skaters, please see episode 2 of the Hit the Deck podcast. So yeah, if depending on whether you have 3, 4, 5 skaters out there, that game can change pace a lot. If you have a lot of people out there and you have a small surface, then it can actually slow down quite a bit because there's not a lot of room for people to go. But if you have a reduced number of players with a small surface, that game is going to speed up like crazy because they have room to run around and the puck doesn't have a lot of room to shoot around. So there's a lot of factors involved in determining what the speed of the game is. The best advice that I can offer is you just kind of have to take it as it comes. I mean, you can anticipate to a degree what it's going to be based on the conditions, but it's not like a linear formula like, oh, well, the surface is smooth, so I'm going to be facing a super fast game, or the surface is rough, so I can take a nap between each shot.
All right, great. Yeah, and that's part of the fun of participating in deck hockey tournaments and other leagues, is that you have to be on your toes, and it's a little bit different from here to there, and keeps it interesting, and hopefully keeps players wanting to play more and enjoy themselves a lot more. So.
One more thing I
Sure.
will point out from a goalie perspective is if you are playing on an open area like the tournament that we mentioned, which was the Rocky Sullivan's tournament.
Yeah, and just as a teaser, we will be talking more about deck hockey tournaments next episode, so we will absolutely mention the Rocky Sullivan's tournament and have the complete details on their upcoming tournament in April.
Ooh, coming soon. But the reason why I bring up the Rocky Sullivan's tournament is because that, as I said, is on a street, and the street itself is the playing surface, the sidewalk is the sidelines, but there's no boards. So a situation like that, as a goalie, you're going to have to be on your toes in terms of where the puck is going and, more importantly, how you can handle it. Some goalies are primarily, they prefer to freeze the puck if it's near them. Some goalies, such as myself, prefer to stick handle the puck away from them in a controlled manner because that's just the game. You know, every goalie has a different style. But in a situation like that, you might need to be more conscious of the fact that you do need to freeze it, because if you try and stick handle it, it could easily go out of play since there are no boards. So that is one very notable wrinkle that is injected into that kind of surface.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, I should say, it just keeps it a lot more interesting and fun when you're participating in different deck hockey surfaces and in different tournaments. so to speak. So we definitely recommend you go out there and see what else is that the world of deck hockey has to offer. So with that, let's go take a look into the gear bag and a product that...
Speaking of surfaces.
Exactly. This is an excellent segue. A product that Gary and I have both tested out is called the Hockey Wraparound. And we're not talking about the play, but
Matto! Sorry.
Exactly. They have a website. It's hockeywraparound.us. And according to the site, and this is a quote from them, the Hockey Wraparound allows you to use your favorite ice hockey stick off of the ice without fear of damaging the blade. And what this particular item is, it's a piece of thin stainless steel with teeth that is designed to, well, wrap around the blade of the stick, protecting the blade from being worn down from concrete. So like we said, Gary and I have tested the product out ourselves. They did make a wraparound for a goalie stick. The last time I went to the website, I didn't see it available. I'm not saying that it is not, but just wanted to clarify that.
Actually, James, I was able to get a goalie wraparound on the Inline Warehouse site today.
Oh, excellent.
So given that what you said, I thought they might be a little scarce at the moment, and I wanted to pick one up to replace the one that I have now because it's certainly getting worn down through repeated use. So just FYI, both the goalie and the forward/defense wraparound style are available currently on the Inline/Ice Warehouse sites, and we'll actually post links to that on the Facebook page. So
cool. All right. The assist to Mr. Rhino Mac. And again, yeah, like they said, they are specific to emphasize that the wraparound is designed for practice and not necessarily for in-game play. So the good thing about that is it's very well designed so you can practice your shot when you're not on the ice and you're not going to wear down your blade because Lord knows hockey sticks and blades are really expensive, and for non-professionals like we are, we have to pay for these things out of pocket. So we like to take care of our equipment and make it last as long as possible. Again, Mr. Gary Mack had some great tidbits on how to preserve his goalie gear in the previous podcast, so definitely check that out. But we have used the wraparound in game situations. So the surface that we play on is a handball court, and it's very rough. So concrete, right? And it's very bumpy. So when you put the wraparound on your stick, and then you're able to tape the stick as usual, the blade, as you would if you did not have the wraparound on it. So it doesn't add that much bulk to the blade itself, so you're still able to puck handle. If it's with a puck or a ball, it doesn't affect it that much. The
and it conforms. Sorry, James.
Yes.
It conforms to the blade of your stick. So no matter how big a curve you have or what the angle of your blade is, then it'll still fit without a problem.
Absolutely. And the website says that the wraparound usually adds about 40 grams to the weight of your stick overall. So it makes it a little bit heavier. When you're stick handling it, you could feel it. And so that's good for muscle memory and development as well with the forearms and whatnot. But I recommend it, at least checking it out. It's about $30, at least on the Hockey Wraparound website, with additional shipping. I'm assuming that it's probably around the same price on the Inline Warehouse and Ice Warehouse websites.
The goalie one's a little more expensive. I didn't check the forward stick.
Yeah, the forwards is about $30 a pop. So it's worth it, especially if you have a very expensive blade, which those things the blade itself could cost upwards of $50 and above. So.
Although I would like to point out that the Hockey Wraparound site mentions that they have a couple of different models. One is the one you mentioned. The 40-gram one is meant for practice and can be used in game situations. They also have another model that's a little bit thinner and a little bit lighter that's not meant to be used for shooting. It's only meant to be used to practice passing and stick handling.
Last minute remaining in the podcast.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so they have different options for you for how you want to use the wraparound, and I recommend it, so go out and check it out.
Sweet. Okay, so that being said, I guess that'll wrap up the third episode of the Hit the Deck podcast. Thank you so much for checking us out. If you, the listener, have a question or a comment or a concern or just want to shoot us anything at all, really, you can email us at hitthedeck@gmail.com. Again, that's hitthedeck, DEK, like deck hockey, which we're discussing, at gmail.com. On Facebook and on Instagram, we are at Hit the Deck, and on Twitter, we are at Hit the Deck Pod. We would like to thank, as always, Anthony Sajazi for music, Pops for being the voice of the podcast, and the LIQ for helping us out with other sound stuff. And please, by all means, feel free to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. James, is there anything you would like to close us out with?
Yes, with it being our third episode and threes being important in hockey with the hat trick, I'm throwing my hat. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. And finally, one last friendly reminder. It's deck hockey. Don't be that guy. Thanks, everybody.